Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to start hearing evidence from witnesses for Celotex, who were the manufacturers of most of the insulation that was used in the refurbishment. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, good morning. I'm now going to call Mr. Jonathan Roome, please.
Thank you.
After me, I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence that I shall give
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roome. Would you like to sit down and make yourself comfortable?
Thank you.
Right. Yes, Mr. Millett.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Roome, good morning. Can I begin by thanking you very much for coming to the inquiry today and giving us your evidence that you're going to give us. If you have any difficulty understanding any of my questions that I'm asking you, I'm very happy to repeat the question or put the question in a different way. If you need a break at any point, then just let us know. We will be taking scheduled breaks mid-morning and mid-afternoon. Could you please also try and keep your voice up so that the person who sits to your immediate right, who's the transcriber, can get down your evidence. Now, you've made one statement dated the 28th of September 2018, I think. Could I please show you that? It will be at CEL 30010031. It should also be on the screen in front of you, as well as in the folder on your desk. Can you confirm that that is your statement?
There's nothing coming up on the screen, just to explain.
You haven't got it on your screen yet?
No, there's nothing coming up on the screen, no.
Oh, right.
Well, we must solve that.
I could just see you, Mr. Millett.
Right. That's not going to help you.
We'll just see if we can
Can we solve that problem?
solve that now.
Yeah, it's up.
Very good. Thank you very much. If anything happens again with your screen, please let us know straight away.
I will do.
We'll solve it. Is that your statement? Looking at the first page.
It seems to be, yes.
Yes, okay. Can I show you page 24, please? Is that your signature?
It is, yes.
Above the date and the name, it is. Have you read this witness statement recently?
I have.
And are its contents true, can you confirm?
They are.
And have you discussed your evidence with anybody before coming here today?
No.
I'm going to begin some questions about your qualifications, if I may. Can I show you your statement at page 4 and look at paragraph 17 and 18 with you? At 17, you say you have 5 GCSEs in mathematics, English language, English literature, physics and chemistry, and a BTEC National Diploma in Business and Finance from Brooklands College, and a CSCS, Construction Skills Certification Scheme, Construction-Related Occupation Card, registration 026225511. And you also set out your experience at paragraphs 19 through to 22, and you say, and I'm not going to read it all out to you, but in 1994 you joined Savile & Holdsworth as a client support executive. They were psychometric testers. In 1997 you joined GE Lighting as part of General Electric as a pricing specialist. And if we go over the page to page 5 and go to paragraph 21, we see that you then joined Great Eastern Trading in 2004 as a national account manager, looking after the company's account with B&Q. And in 2007, March 2007, you joined Hilti as an account manager in the M&E Mechanical and Electrical Division for the West London region, as you say there. And then after 3 years, you became a project manager in the company for all client construction and engineering relationships on the Heathrow Airport campus. And you explain a little bit more there about your experiences at Hilti. Am I right in thinking that beyond your BTEC in business finance and your CSCS card, you have no technical qualifications?
That's correct.
And you've got no professional qualifications either?
No, that's correct.
And you never worked as an architect?
No.
Or a designer?
No.
Or in a building control body?
No.
Before you joined Celotex, had you ever done any professional training on the building regulations?
No, I hadn't.
And so you didn't have any training either on approved document B or the UK or European testing regimes for materials?
No,
Now, you joined Celotex in March 2014, I think, didn't you?
that's correct.
And prior to that, you'd worked at Hilti since 2007, as you say, paragraph 22 in your statement.
That's correct.
Now, Hilti is a company, is it, that provides technology and services for the construction industry? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
And from 2012, is it right that you worked as a sales specialist in Hilti's building envelope division?
Correct.
And you, I think, say that that was the design and build of exterior of a building.
Correct.
That's what it involved, is
Yeah.
it? And did that include working on projects with rain screen cladding?
It did.
It did. So do we take it from that you had some knowledge of cladding projects by the time you joined Celotex?
I did, yeah.
Let's look at CEL 30/10031, page 5. This is your statement at paragraph 22, and the last sentence there. You say that it was that experience, namely your experience at Hilti's building envelope division, that led you to join Celotex in March 2014. That's right, is it?
That's part of the reason, yes.
What was the other part?
I was looking for a new position and a different company to work for. I'd decided that I wanted to leave Hilti and experience a new job with better pay.
Were you recruited specifically because of your understanding of sales in relation to building envelope systems?
No,
When you joined Celotex, your job title, I think, was Major Project Stroke Specification Manager.
that's correct.
And is that effectively, or was that effectively, a sales role?
Basically, yes.
Right. Now, we look at paragraph 27 of your statement on the next page, please, page 6. You identify an exhibit, an email exchange there. If we look at paragraph 27, you say, my role at Celotex was to promote its insulation products and services to key stakeholders such as architects, developers, main contractors, installers and consultants in London and the home counties. Can we take it from that the potential customers for Celotex products that you are expecting to deal with would include some highly qualified professionals?
That's correct.
And those professionals might well ask you difficult technical questions from time to time.
They would, yes.
Was there a support system or resource within Celotex that you could go to if you had trouble answering any technical inquiries from potential customers, such as architects or developers?
There was, yes.
Who was that? Or what was it?
So the system was that there was a technical team within Celotex who were basically desk-bound, who would be taking incoming calls or emails, any sort of inquiries, namely or mostly, significantly, the thermal calculations requested. And if there was any other further performance-led criteria that needed to be answered, then that team would be the one that would predominantly deal with those inquiries.
I see. And who ran that desk? Who ran the technical team?
I think at the... Do you have a picture of my organogram that you can bring up?
Yes, we do.
It might be useful to have a look, to refresh my memory.
It's CEL 30/12298.
So if we look at the third column, I don't know if you can blow that up a bit more. The head of technical for Celotex was Rob Warren, and below him then there were different areas. So the person who headed up the call centre team, the technical team under Rob Warren, would have been Jamie Hayes. So he would have been dealing with the day-to-day running of inquiries that were coming through by email, by phone.
Yes. And we can see Louise Garlick's name there, and also Jamie Hayes.
Jamie Hayes is the person I just referred to, who was looking after the technical team.
Yes. Now, you say that your role involved delivering CPD presentations.
That's correct.
What kinds of presentations did you give?
It would have been, it was, sorry, I should say, a CPD which was all-encompassing to explain the role of Celotex, the products that they offered, and the services they offered. So things like the thermal calculations, the products, where they could be used, and also SAP and SBEM assessments, which was a separate company which was under the Celotex banner, who would be able to work out the complete thermal performance of a building.
Did you give CPD presentations to architects habitually?
I did, yes.
So you would go to their offices, would you, and present?
When requested, I would, yes.
Right. And what was the commercial purpose of Celotex sending somebody like you to make those sorts of presentations?
It was to engage with the architects at sort of the beginning of the design process, as it were, not necessarily on a particular project, but just to instigate a sort of an interest in the use of Celotex products over one of their competitors.
I see. So with an eye to them selecting Celotex?
Correct.
Instead of another competitor of yours?
Yes.
I see. And did you ever give presentations on fire performance of any Celotex product?
I didn't know.
Did you ever give any presentations, CPD presentations, involving anything technical?
No, not. There was just the one general CPD that covered all of the products and the services.
Did any of those presentations include the FR 5000 product before August 2014, when RS 5000 was launched?
It would likely be one of the products that was in the whole mix. So I would have gone through each of the products and where that would have been relevant to be used or potentially used on the building.
Right. Did you present, if that's the right word, where FR 5000 could be used on a building?
It would, I can't recall, but it's likely.
What claims do you remember, in general, you would make to those listening to your CPD presentations about where FR 5000 could be used?
I suppose before any above 18 metres or any reference to the high-rise buildings, it would have just been a generic
Right.
application on a wall of a building.
Right. Did you ever say it can't be used above 18 metres?
In those initial stages, no, that wasn't part of the presentation.
Did you ever give CPD presentations to other colleagues of yours within Celotex?
No, the whole purpose of the CPD was to present to professionals who needed to earn points towards their professional development.
I follow. Did you ever give these CPD presentations to building control officers?
Not that I can remember, no.
Or approved inspectors?
No, I don't think so.
What about local authorities more generally?
Not that I can remember, no.
Right. Can I then turn to another topic, which is the properties of Celotex PIR products? And I want to understand your understanding of FR 5000 and RS 5000 at the time of the Grenfell Tower project. How much technical knowledge do you have, or did you have at that time, in relation to the manufacturing of Celotex's products?
Very little. I suppose the extent was to be shown around the factory and given the bullet points as to the performance of the material.
You understood at the very least that Celotex FR 5000 and then latterly RS 5000 were PIR boards, polyisocyanated boards.
Yes, I was aware of those.
And that they were thermosetting insulants.
Correct.
By definition.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, Mr. Bailey, Ray Bailey of Harley, said, and I'll show you what he says in his statement. It's HAR 3010184 at page 32, please. And I just want to show you what he says at paragraph 126. And this is under the question that he's been asked. How commonly used are, 1, these particular cladding panels, 2, this type of insulation, etc., and I don't need anything else. And in 126, para 126, he says, the introduction of Part L, requiring the upgrade of insulation values, led to the development of rigid foam boards made from PIR or PUR, and these were aggressively marketed to the industry as a whole in order to meet the government's demands for energy conservation. Do you agree with him that the need to meet thermal efficiency requirements was, at your time at Celotex, a major driver of the insulation market?
I think in all aspects of the application of insulation products, it was a driver for the government to save energy, basically, yeah. And the use of these types of products was one of the ways of retaining energy within the building.
Yes. So thermal efficiency effectively means reducing the amount of heat transfer in and out of the building.
The amount of heat lost and the amount of
Or heat
energy
loss.
and cost lost, yes.
Heat loss or cold gain, if you like.
Yes, exactly.
Is it fair to say that better insulation prevents heat transfer, and therefore the better the insulation for that purpose, the better for marketing purposes?
That's true, yes.
Yeah. And were you aware at the time that the performance of it, or thermal performance, was represented by something called a lambda value?
That's correct.
Now, you may be aware the product that was originally specified for use on Grenfell Tower was FR 5000. Did you know that?
I was made aware of that at some point, yes.
At some point during your involvement with the Grenfell Tower project, so far as you were?
I think it was brought to my attention by Harley, yes.
Right.
So,
Do you remember when?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it may have been late 2014, potentially.
Right. We'll look at some documents which might help the
Okay.
recollection in due course.
Thank you.
Before I go there, can we look at MAX 50216, please? This is the data sheet for Celotex FR 5000, and it's issue 2. And if you look at the top right-hand corner of this document, you can see that it's dated January 2012. So that's before you joined in 2014, as we know. When you arrived at Celotex in March 2014, did you become familiar with this document?
I would have been able to reference it if I needed to look at particular data within it, yes.
Did you, after you arrived, have an opportunity or a need to look at it in any detail in order to answer any questions that a customer might have posed to you?
I may have done, yes. I often used documents like these to refresh my memory and to be able to give over facts.
Are you able to tell us who within Celotex compiled this document?
From experience, it would have been the product between the product management and marketing departments, who were one, basically.
Can we look at the first paragraph? It says, under the introduction, Celotex FR 5000 is our premium performance PIR solution. And then it says, it's rather a long sentence, through ongoing product innovation and breakthrough design, FR 5000 represents pioneering progression with the PIR market offering an insulation board with, then you read down a little bit, and it says Class 0 fire performance. Do you see that?
I do.
And then if you look at the third chunk of text down, there are 6 bullet points underneath a sentence that says, with FR 5000, you are specifying an insulation board that, and then it says, has Class 0 fire performance throughout the entire product in accordance with BS 476. Did you ever have an occasion to look at those references to Class 0 fire performance that I've just read to you in this document at the time?
Sorry, in what respect?
Did you ever have a need to look at FR 5000's fire performance and look at this document in order to check it?
I may have done if I was asked.
What did you understand the significance of FR 5000 having Class 0 fire performance to have been?
Just that it met with a particular British standard.
What did that signify to you?
That my understanding of these types of products, or this product, was that Class O represented a particular 2 references in the BS 476 standard for, I think it's surface spread of flame and fire propagation, and having those both passed would then relate to the Class O, or sorry, Class 0. It was in the industry referenced Class O quite often, performance.
And what would be the benefit of a product having Class 0B, did you think?
I was told that it was a laboratory test, and it was some sort of resistance to fire.
Right. Did you know anything more than that?
No.
Did you ever go and look at the tests on which this claim was based?
No, I didn't. I wouldn't have had access to those sorts of documents.
You wouldn't have had access to them. Does that mean you were barred access, or you wouldn't have had access easily?
Well, I don't think anyone within the sales team would have ever had access to any of the test data behind any of these products.
Well, what if you were challenged by a knowledgeable customer or architect or designer who actually asked for these tests?
Well, I would pose the question to those that had access to those documents and ask them to, either release those documents if they would. I don't think they ever did, because I was not party to those documents.
You, in the last two answers, are giving me the impression, and please correct it if it's the wrong impression, Mr. Roome, that the sales team was essentially barred from actually seeing the test data. In other words, that is something that you wouldn't be allowed to see. Is that right?
It's something we were never given. It's only latterly, I suppose, in my tenure within Celotex, when I was posed those exact type of questions. Could I have access, or could the specialist have access to things like the fire testing documents, that I was told that they were, I suppose, trying to think of the word. I can't think of the word, but they weren't allowed out of the business, out of the custodians of those documents.
Right. But within Celotex, just to pin the point down a little bit more, do I take it that there was effectively a wall between the sales team and the technical team, whereby the sales team would not be allowed to have access to the technical data, the test data?
Yes, we were only shown what we were allowed to be shown.
Looking at the fourth bullet point down, has Class 0 fire performance throughout the entire product in accordance with BS 476. What did you understand at the time, if anything, by the expression Class 0 fire performance throughout the entire product in accordance with BS 476? It's focusing on the words throughout the entire product.
I think it meant, from my recollection, it meant that the whole product, so the product comprises of the foam board, but also of the aluminium, what they call the facer on either side. And as far as I can understand, the Class O or 0 related to the full product, all of the components combined.
Did you? Do you know whether FR 5,000 as opposed to 4,000 was ever subjected to a BS 476 test of the core?
I wouldn't be able to tell you that.
Right. Did you know that FR 5,000 was not a material of limited combustibility?
I knew that, yes.
You knew that?
Yeah.
Did you know that it had not passed a test which met criteria under BR 135 using full-scale test data under BS 8414?
I knew. Once RS 5000, that was the reason that RS 5000 was brought to the market.
Indeed. And therefore, did you understand that FR 5000 couldn't be used in external wall constructions on buildings over 18 metres?
I did.
You did. Did you always know that after you joined Celotex?
I can't remember when exactly, but it was asked of us at one point for a project, and I passed that question to the technical team, and they responded that FR 5000 could not be used in a building above 18 metres.
Now, let's go to CLG 50224, please, at page 119. And I'd like just to show you this part of Appendix A of Approved Document B, Now, Mr. Roome, I'm going to proceed on the basis that you're not familiar with this document, or at least weren't familiar with it at the time you were at Celotex. Would that be fair?
It was a document that I was introduced to, so it was one that I would have become more familiar with during my time at Celotex.
Thank you. Let's look at this on the page, Appendix A, Performance of Materials, Products and Structures. Note 2, any test evidence used to substantiate the fire resistance rating of a construction should be carefully checked to ensure that it demonstrates compliance that is adequate and applicable to the intended use. Small differences in detail, such as fixing method, joints, dimensions, and the introduction of insulation materials, etc., may significantly affect the rating. Were you aware of that note within Appendix A of ADB when you joined Celotex, or at any time thereafter when you worked at Celotex?
I think latterly, after the launch of RS 5000.
And just to complete the tour of the document, can we go please to page 122 and look at paragraph 16 in the bottom left-hand corner? It says there, results of tests on proprietary materials are frequently given in literature available from manufacturers and trade associations. Any reference used to substantiate the surface spread of flame rating of a material or product should be carefully checked to ensure that it's suitable, adequate, and applicable to the construction to be used. Small differences in detail, such as thickness, substrate, colour, form, fixings, adhesives, etc., may significantly affect the rating. Again, were you familiar with that provision in approved document B?
I would have read this document at some point, through my tenure within Celotex, most likely after the launch of RS 5000.
Right. Were you trained or equipped to answer any questions from customers who did choose carefully to check the test evidence supporting the claim for Class 0 in the FR 5000 datasheet, for example?
I would only be able to respond to them with the literature that I had available to me.
What would you do, or would have done, if an architect or designer or a consultant had come to you with paragraph 16 that we can see on the page there and said, I want carefully to check your reference which you're using to substantiate your Class 0 surface spread of flame claim?
I would have forwarded that question directly to the technical team to be answered.
Yes, I see. We've been looking very briefly at lambda values. Now, we can see if we can go back to the data sheet, perhaps we don't need to, but that was marketed as having a lambda value of 21, 0.021. Do you remember that?
I do, yes.
Were you aware of how Celotex went about quantifying the lambda value of its products in general?
From when I joined the company, I was there was an introduction to the company, so I had things like a factory tour, for instance, and that involved sort of walking around with members within the factory to take a look at the different production lines, and also the sort of I suppose the little testing area they had where they sort of tried to show me the cribs in which they performed the Class O, the Class 0 testing, the BS467, which they needed to take samples of each of the products to validate, and one of which was the lambda value. There was a way of testing the lambda value. I didn't really pay too much attention. I wouldn't be able to tell you too much about the process, but I knew that they did it in-house within the factory, and they had to take spot checks of each of the production runs of the material.
Right. Now, can we go to CEL 401200? This is an email from Jonathan Roper, or John Roper as he calls himself, to you on the 28th of April 2014. And there are some attachments to it, as you can see. And he says, Jonathan has promised, find attached the training presentations we've gone through this morning, as well as BS 13165, the standard all PIR manufacturers produce to, and BS 84141, the cladding fire test. Any questions, give me a shout. Do you remember attending that training presentation, or those training presentations he's referring to?
Not specifically, but this might have been part of my, or it would have been part of the sort of initial training that was given to me, as would have been given to anyone who started with the company.
Was there any discussion during those presentations to which he's referring of what came to be launched as RS 5000 later in the year?
I can't be sure.
Let's look at CEL 401201, please. This is the first of the attachments, the CE marking and best in class slides. If you look at that, it's entitled Technical Training, and if you look at the next page, it says CE marking, best in class and Q&A, with 45 minutes being allocated to best in class. And if you go to slide 25, if we can, there's a quiz. I don't know if you remember this quiz. Do you remember this quiz?
Not
Right.
vividly, no.
No. Look at question 4. It says, which 2 tests must be passed to obtain Class 0 fire rating? You see that?
I do.
And we could see the answer, which is given on the next slide at page 26. Bullet point 4, BS 476, Part 6 and 7. Does it follow that by this point, this is late April 2014, at the very latest, you were aware of what Class 0 was and what tests you had to pass in order to obtain it?
That would be correct, yes.
Yes. The slides then go on to address the history of the Celotex FR5000 range, don't they? Do you remember that? Let's look at them if you're
Yes, please, yeah.
going to puzzle over it. Paragraph 28, sorry, slide 28, on page 28, we can pick that up. History of FR/CG, and it says at the top of the page there, FR4000 launched in April 2008 with a lambda of 22 and Class 0 fire performance. Strategy to create competitive advantage with phenolic solely on fire. Now, just pausing there, did you understand that the reason for the development of Celotex's FR range was to compete with phenolic products on fire performance?
I don't recall that particular statement, no.
Right. Did you get the impression at this time, late April 2014, that the development of PIR products was to compete with Kingspan Cooltherm K15 in particular, as a particular product?
Not particularly, no. I know Cooltherm as a range was, or is, their highest performance range of boards, and I can only deduce that the idea that Celotex were launching the 5000 over the 4000 would mean that they would bridge that thermal gap, make it more competitive thermally.
If we go to page 51, we can see for slide 51, and that says, you see, it sets out a comparison there between phenolic and FR5000, and it says in the 4th bullet point down, Class 0 throughout the entire product. Was that a claim in relation to FR5000? Looks like it was.
It looks like it, yes.
Yeah. Do you remember whether there was any elaboration of that point during this training presentation?
I think it was something to do with the way that Kingspan and their statement of Class O or 0 didn't apply to the full product, the complete product. But I can't be sure exactly what element of it did not meet that criteria.
So you refer to Kingspan in that answer. So do we take it from that the reference to phenolic in the title banner, Celotex FR5000 versus phenolic, should be read as versus Kingspan K15?
I would say so, yes, because Kingspan were or are the largest manufacturer of the phenolic type of insulation boards in the country.
Does the 4th bullet point down therefore tell us that the view in Celotex at the time was that Kingspan K15 did not have Class 0 throughout the entire product?
Well, I think the K range, not just K15, because FR5000 wasn't up against any particular product of Kingspan. That would have been the RS 5000 that came later. So the K relates to cool therm, and that would have been that range of boards, high performance boards.
And just to repeat the question, does that tell us that the view in Celotex at the time was that the K range, sold by Kingspan, did not have class 0 throughout the entire product?
I think that's what was being put out there, yes.
Right. And was there any discussion at this presentation about what class 0 throughout the entire product meant?
I can't be sure, but I think it was something to do with the foam and the aluminium faces being the complete package.
Right.
So class 0 related to the whole thing rather than just the aluminium or just the foam. But I can't remember which way round it was.
Can we look at CEL 401203, please? This is one of the other presentations that John Roper sent you of the 28th of April, which he attached. And this is about third-party approvals, as you can see from the first page. Can we go to page 13 in that, please? Which is the last slide in the deck. And it says, as a title, what we don't have, ... LPCB, FM approval, above 18-metre fire test. Now, do you remember this particular slide? Does it ring a bell with you?
Not particularly, no.
Do you remember whether you had any cause to ask yourself, what does above 18-metre fire test mean?
I think I may have known that term from being in cladding or being around sort of cladding products before that time when I was at Hilti, so that wouldn't have been a new term to me.
Right, what did you think it meant?
Well, certain products of a certain nature or flammable nature could not be used above a certain height in a building.
Right. Just to try to tease out the point, did that mean that Celotex didn't have a material of limited combustibility?
Well, I don't think they ever had a product of limited combustibility. It could never have been classified as that.
Right. What would have been the test in the above 18-metre fire test that you understood this slide to mean? Would it be a test for limited combustibility or a test under BS 8414?
It would have been a test under BS 8414. Right.
And that would have been distinct from whether a product had class 0, clearly.
Yeah, because class O or class 0 would not have qualified that a product to be used above 18 metres if it's an insulant.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And just to be clear on this, it's right to think that FR 5000 had passed the tests to achieve a class 0 classification, but hadn't passed an above 18-metre fire test.
Correct.
In your experience as it stood at the time, was this understanding, in other words, that there was a difference between class 0 and a test under 8414, one that was generally shared by your customers?
I think the professionals in that market the answer would have been yes.
Right. In general, at the time, was your experience that the customers you were dealing with knew that as an insulation material, FR 5000 either had to be a material of limited combustibility or else had passed a full-scale test under BS 8414 to BR 135 criteria in order to be used above 18 metres?
I would hope they would, yes, but I can't be sure.
Now I'm going to ask you a few questions about approved document B. Were you aware in and from March 2014, when you joined Celotex, that approved document B was part of the building regulations?
I would have known, yes.
Yes. Were you familiar with Part B?
Not specifically, no.
Right. Were you familiar with the requirement in Part B4 of the building regulations themselves relating to external flame spread?
Not until after the launch of the RS 5000 when it became far more important.
Were you aware of the general principle under B4 that the external walls of the building shall adequately resist the spread of fire over the walls.
Not at that stage within my tenure at the company.
When did you become aware during your tenure of the company of that requirement?
This would have been after the launch of the RS5000, and that sort of voyage of discovery of finding out a bit more about the regulations or about feedback from potential customers.
So you embarked, did you, on a voyage of discovery about Approved Document B after the launch of RS5000?
It made me more aware of the document and my need to sort of better understand that document just from the questions that were being asked by certain customers.
Did you go away and read the bits of Approved Document B that you felt you needed to in order to be able to address your customers' concerns?
I generally familiarised myself with parts of the document that I was being referred to. I can't say that I particularly understood everything within that document implicitly, but I at least knew where to look if I was directed.
Did you at least glean this much from Approved Document B when you did look at it, that there were special requirements in relation to buildings above 18 metres so far as concerned the external wall construction?
I did, yes.
Now, we've seen from the 28th of April email that we looked at CEL 401200. Let's just go back to that. But we can see from that Mr. Roper sent you BS 8414 Part 1, as well as other things, didn't he?
He did, yes.
The last attachment. Was that the first time that you became aware of BS 8414 Part 1, or as he calls it, the cladding fire test?
It may have been, yes.
Right. Did you open the attachments and have a look at the test?
I would have thought I would have done, yes.
Right. You say you would have done. Was it because it was your habit to open attachments to documents when you were sent them?
Yeah, generally.
Can we go to CLG 50224 at page 95, please? I think given the answers you've given us just a moment ago, we can take this quite quickly. Here is section 12 of Approved Document B, construction of external walls. And if you look at the right-hand column under the heading external wall construction, you can see that it says at paragraph 12.5, the external envelope of a building should not provide a medium for fire spread if it is likely to be a risk to health or safety. The use, it says, the use of combustible materials in the cladding system and extensive cavities may present such a risk in tall buildings. And then it goes on, external walls should either meet the guidance given in paragraphs 12.6 to 12.9 or meet the performance criteria given in the BRE report, Fire Performance of External Thermal Insulation for Walls of Multi-Storey Buildings, BR 135, for cladding systems using full-scale test data from BS 8414 Part 1, 2002, or BS 8414 Part 2, 2005. I don't think I need the rest of that. Did you discover this paragraph or section of the approved documents during your voyage of discovery after August 2014, or do you think you looked at this before that?
It's hard to tell, but ultimately, Celotex did not have a product that was usable above 18 metres. So at that point of this document, this would have just confirmed the case that the reasoning why the products like FR5000 would not be used. So it's more likely that this document, I'd have become more familiar with this document after the launch of the RS5000 product.
I see. Did you understand from this document, and we can turn the page, that there are essentially two routes to compliance if you were going to put insulation on a building above 80 metres? Either it had to be a material of limited combustibility under 12.7, or else, as a separate route to compliance, it had to meet the performance criteria in BR 135 by means of successfully passing a full-scale test under BS 8414.
This would have been, I suppose, more relevant after, or I would have been more knowledgeable after the launch of RS 5000, when it was better defined that this was the criteria that was needed for the use of RS 5000.
Right. Prior to the launch, before the launch in August 2014, can you give us an idea of what you understood to be how an insulation material could comply if it was going to be used above 18 metres?
I can't remember the timing of things, but at the time prior to the launch of RS 5000, I would have just been of the mindset that Celotex did not have a product. So as long as high-rise buildings above 18 metres. So as long as I had this as a reference document, I don't think I would have needed to understood in the early part of my tenure within the company the rhymes and reasons why the product couldn't be used.
If we look at, just for completeness probably rather than anything else, paragraph 12.7, you can see it says insulation materials stroke products. In a building with a story 18 metres or more above ground level, any insulation product, filler material, not including gaskets, sealants, or similar, etc., used in the external wall construction should be of limited combustibility. See Appendix A. Were you aware of that requirement from March 2014, or did you only become aware of that requirement after the launch of RS 5000 in August 2014, do you think?
It's hard to tell, but I mean, up until the launch of RS 5000, there was no Celotex product for high-rise buildings.
At the very least, did you know that there was a distinction between Class 0 on the one hand and limited combustibility?
I knew that, yes. Yeah.
Can I then ask you to go to CEP 57294? CEP 57294, please. This is a guidance note produced by the BCA, the Building Control Alliance, and it's entitled BCA Technical Guidance Note 18, and this is issue 0, June 2014. Now, you say in your statement, and I don't think there's a need to look at it, it's page 17 of paragraph 57, that this document was brought to your attention by your customers. Just looking at it and trying the best you can with your memory, when do you think you first had that technical guidance note brought to your attention?
I don't remember an exact date, but I would hazard a guess that it would have been following the launch of the RS 5000 product.
And in what context, do you remember?
In that it was a way of qualifying the product to be used in buildings above 18 metres in a certain, in one of the ways that was described in this document.
When you say a way of qualifying the product, what do you mean?
Well, the route to compliance. So there was, I think, 3 routes to compliance in this initial document, one of which was to have non-combustible materials, which Celotex did not have, and the other 2 were to have a full-scale fire test, which they did once they'd launched, well, before they launched the the RS 5000 product, and the third one was to, get a specialist, a fire specialist, basically, to look at the performance of the building, to look at escape mechanisms and other areas of the building to gauge their knowledge of the risk or of the building and look at the suitability of products that way. But in a nutshell, either use a non-combustible, have a fire test with that exact build-up, or involve a specialist.
Do we take it from that nobody within Celotex brought Technical Guidance Note 18, this document, to your attention?
I don't think so, no.
Were you surprised to discover its existence?
I don't know if surprise was the word. It was just, I suppose I described it as a voyage of discovery for myself. I was given certain information initially at the launch of the product, and then certain other things came to light whilst I was working for the company and interacting with customers or potential customers who were involved in this side of the market.
Were you surprised to discover the existence of this document from a potential customer as opposed to from within Celotex itself?
not. I can't say the word is surprised, but I would have thought if a company is launching a product and the timing of this document of June of the preceding year, they may or should have known about this document, maybe.
Right. If we look at page 1 under key issues, it has a set of bullet points in the third paragraph down, and says a surface spread of flame classification does not infer any resistance to combustibility. It is solely a measure of the spread of flame across the surface. I think you say you knew that. And then it says in the first bullet point, thermosetting insulants, rigid polyurethane foam boards, do not meet the limited combustibility requirements of ADB 2 table A7 and should not be accepted as meeting ADB 2 paragraph 12.7. However, if they are included as part of a cladding system being tested to BR135 and BS8414, the complete assembly may ultimately prove to be acceptable. Now, did you understand when you saw this document at least that FR5000 and indeed any other PIR products were not materials of limited combustibility?
I did, yes.
You just told us that before. And that meant that at least from this point onwards, when you saw this document, if no other, the only way you could use a PIR product above a building, in a building above 18 metres in height, was as part of the system that had successfully passed the BS8414 test and met the BR135 criteria.
Correct.
Yeah. I then want to turn to Class 0 again. If we could just go back to approved document B at CLG 50224, please, and go to page 95. I want us to show you page 95 over to 96, and then also diagram 40. At the very foot of 95, there's a heading that says external surfaces, and you see section 12.6. The external surfaces of walls should meet the provisions in diagram 40. You see that. Then if we look at diagram 40, that's on page 97. And if you look at that, and look at E, any building, you can see that you can see that diagram there, and you can see that, in a nutshell, there is a qualification for external surfaces for buildings over 18 metres, that the material should have Class 0, national class, or Class B, S3, D2 or better, European class. You see that?
I can see that,
You
yes.
see that? Did you know that at the time, I say at the time, from March or April 2014, or is that something you came to learn later?
I think that specific information was something that was brought to light either during the launch of RS 5000 or afterwards.
Yes. Now, can I ask you to look at what Mr. Ray Bailey told the inquiry in his oral evidence? Can we go to the transcript for his evidence at day 33, please, which is the 9th of September 2020, at page 10. And if we look at that together, he is asked the question at line 6. I probably ought to start at line 1. Where it's put to him that it's clear from this technical note, and that's technical guidance note 18 we've just been looking at, Mr. Roome, that Class 0 and limited combustibility were different. Did you understand that they were different at the time? Answer, yes. Did you understand at the time that they weren't interchangeable concepts? And he says, actually, they are. And he says, then he's asked, they're interchangeable, are they? And his answer at line 10, well, if you look at table 8, in Appendix A, it actually says Class 0, and then the European equivalent, which is the UK Class 0, is described as non-combustible, limited combustibility, or a composite that complies with Section 13B. So Class 0 covers all of those three conditions. And then if we go on in the same transcript to page 12, and look at lines 12 to 15, he says there, no, sorry, let me just rephrase. If it's Class 0 for surface spread of flame, it's on the outside if it's throughout. I took that to mean it was of limited combustibility. Now, without characterising his evidence in any way, do you understand what he's saying in both of the passages I've read to you?
The only thing I can deduce is that he's confused between a British standard and a European standard.
What about a confusion between Class 0 and limited combustibility and their interchangeability?
It's not a statement that can be made.
No. Were you aware that this sort of confusion existed in the market with which you were dealing at the time you were at Celotex?
Not that particularly, but the longer I spent within the company, the longer or the more it seemed that some people were unsure of what could or couldn't be used on buildings above 18 metres.
Right. Did that surprise you?
It did, considering the people that I was talking to, or the vast amount of people I was talking to, were specialists in this arena.
Were you aware that some customers, at the least, in the United Kingdom market in and after 2014 thought that Class 0 meant limited combustibility?
I can't say that for sure.
Right. Did you ever get the sense that Celotex was effectively seeking to capitalise on the confusion between the two in the market that might have existed?
No, I don't think that was their intention, no.
I then want to go to RS 5000 and ask you some questions about the development of that product. Can we go back to your witness statement, please, at page 2? And you say in paragraph 7 on that page that you were not involved in the creation and testing of RS 5000. You say that in the first sentence, because you're not involved in the production of the marketing material. I did not have any input into its contents. I do not know who created the product, how it was physically different from the other products, and didn't have any involvement in or knowledge of the testing of the product, apart from seeing abbreviated versions of the BR 135 test report, etc. When did you first become aware that RS 5000 was being readied for launch?
I suppose in the weeks preceding the actual launch.
We've seen Mr. Roper's email of the 28th of April 2014, which referred to the BS 8414 test. Can we take it from that you were aware by that point, say late April 2014, that Celotex was seeking to develop an insulation product that could be marketed for use above 18 metres?
I can't be sure of the date, but that might have been, around the time.
Okay. And if we continue in your statement to the next paragraph, you say that my knowledge of the RS 5000 product was based on the internal presentation on 5th of August 2014 and the marketing material given to me. And if we look at paragraph 29 on page 7, under the heading RS 5000, you give some more detail there about the launch. And in the second line, you date it as the 5th of August 2014. And in the fourth line from the bottom of that paragraph, you say, the launch of RS 5000 was seen as a big development for Celotex. John Roper gave a presentation giving an overview of approved document B and BR 135, and then gave a presentation on the launch of RS 5000. Lizzie Seaton then presented the marketing communications plan for the product. I've shown you that. Were you aware, as of August 2014, that there had been a BS 8414 test carried out in February 2014 in which RS 5000 had failed?
I wasn't privy to that knowledge, no.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just anxious not to ask the next question.
I was
We're
about to
run
interrupt you,
11 o'clock.
Mr. Millett. Today, as you and everyone else knows, is Armistice Day, and together with the courts and other public bodies, we shall observe 2 minutes silence in memory of those who died in 2 world wars and indeed in other conflicts around the globe. So I invite you to join me in standing to observe the 2 minutes silence. Thank you very much. Yes, just a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roome, my last question to you and your last answer was that you were not aware, as of August 2014, that there had been a BS 8414 test for RS 5000 in the February of that year that had failed. My next question is, did you later become aware of that fact?
I did, much later, yes. At some point in 2015, I can't remember the exact date.
What were the circumstances in which you became aware in 2015 of the 2014 failure, test failure?
I think what it was that one of my customers had questioned the edition or the BR135 document or the BS8414 test, because somewhere along it says revision 2 or edition 2, something like that. And they questioned why this was a second document as opposed to the first, of which I didn't know, so I started asking questions.
And who told you, do you remember, that there had originally been an earlier test, a first test of RS 5000, which had failed?
I think it may have been Jonathan Roper.
Right. What was did you discuss any reasons for the failure with him?
I don't think it was elaborated on, no, just that it did not pass and they had to do a second test.
Do you understand why it didn't pass?
I can only deduce that it failed one of the criteria to allow it to pass, either through the heat and the thermocouples or flame seen out of the top of the test rig.
You say you can only deduce. Does that mean that you didn't actually have a detailed discussion with anybody at Celotex about precisely why the test had been failed?
No, I can only deduce from the facts of how a test would fail.
Right. Now, I take it you did know that a successful test of RS 5000 had been carried out in May 2014.
Yes, because that allowed Celotex to launch the RS 5000 product.
Yes, and you weren't, I think, involved with that test, as you've told us in your statement. You weren't involved in the testing.
No, I wasn't.
Were you involved in any way in the design of the system build-up that was used for testing?
No.
Let's turn to the presentation then in August 2014. Can we go to CEL 409709, please? This is the agenda for the launch presentation on the 5th of August 2014, as you can see from the heading, Celotex RS 5000 launch, 5th of August 2014. Time, 9 o'clock in the morning till 1 o'clock, Tuesday the 5th of August 14. Attending John Roper, Paul Evans, Lizzie Seaton. And then below that, Paul Reed, Chris Nichols, Northern Sales Team and Southern Sales Team. Do I take it that you were present because you were part of the Southern Sales Team?
That's correct.
Now, we can see from the agenda that there was, as the first item on it, approved document B and BR135 overview, JR. And JR is not you, it's John Roper, isn't it?
That's correct.
You share the same initials, and that
Yes.
can be confusing. All right, that's John Roper. And then there was a 45-minute presentation of RS 5000, also by John Roper. Yes?
That's correct.
Yes. Now, can we go to CEL 40's 8668, please, next? This is a 59-page slideshow entitled Celotex RS 5000 launch 5th of August 2014. Do you remember that this slideshow accompanied the launch presentation?
It must have been the one, yes.
Or do you remember being shown a long slideshow?
Yes, I would have been shown the documents.
Can you remember who ran through the slides? Who spoke to the slides?
I think it was John Roper.
Now, let's look at it in detail. Page 3, first of all. It says above 18 metres. And am I right in thinking, and that's the only thing on that page, this was the pithy focus of this whole exercise, looking at the use of RS 5000 above 18 metres.
This was the reason for the product to be launched, yes.
Right. That's another way of putting the same point. Can we then look at page 4? We can see here that the presentation addresses the legislative background. We've got approved document B on the left, BS 8414 Part 2 in the middle, and then BR 135 on the right, so that everyone in the room presumably could see what was being discussed. Was there a detailed discussion about that legislative background by Mr. Roper? Do you remember? Did he explain BS 8414 and BR 135 in any detail?
I can't recall.
Did he go through the requirements of the approved documents, do you think? Do you remember?
I think it's likely he would have gone over the salient points in each that were relevant to the product.
Can we then go to page 7, please? A few slides on, and we can see here a table which sets out national classes and Euro classes. We can see that there are 3 columns: risk category, British standard, and Euro class. Do you know where the risk category on this slide was derived from?
I don't.
Was it suggested that this was an official classification of risk?
I couldn't tell you.
Or do you remember whether it was just presented as an approximate rough guide?
I don't know what was behind that terminology.
Right. You don't know. Are you aware that this risk categorisation has got no basis at all in any guidance in England and Wales?
I don't.
You don't. Did the suggestion on this slide that class 0 is low risk influence your decision about your understanding about class 0? Or not your decision, your understanding about class 0?
No.
Did anyone tell you that the first line was about combustibility, and the tests there are for non-combustibility or limited combustibility, BS 476 Part 4, BS 476 Part 11, but the rest from class 0 down was about surface spread of flame?
I don't recall the information there.
On the face of the document, it looks like there's a confusion, even within this slide, that the first line is about non or limited combustibility with a Euro class A1 or A2, but from low, medium, high, very high risk categories, you're talking about class 0, 1, 2, and worse than class 3, which is not the same as combustibility, is it?
It doesn't look like it, no.
So there's a confusion inherent in this slide itself. Do you accept that?
It seems to be, yes.
Yes. On the next slide, at page 8, we have section 12.5 of ADB. We've looked at that already. And then it goes on to address BR 135. And if you go to page 16, we can see that. This is Annex B of BR 135, where the performance criteria and classification are identified. Did you understand that this was a reference to Annex B of BR 135 when it was presented to you?
It's the test criteria.
Now, if you look at the right-hand side, you can see that there's an extract from the text which starts, the classification applies only to the system. Do you see that?
I do.
I'll just read it to you. The classification applies only to the system as tested and detailed in the classification report. The classification report can only cover the details of the system as tested. It cannot state what is not covered. When specifying or checking a system, it is important to check that the classification documents cover the end-use application. And there's an arrow that points to that paragraph, and in red it says system classification. This suggests that this presentation highlighted the fact that BR 135 only applied to the system and not to its individual components. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Is that your takeaway or recollection of what this part of this presentation was telling you?
It is.
Yes. And you understood that at the time, did you, clearly?
I did, yes.
And would you agree that this presentation, so far as I've shown it to you this morning, sets out the various routes to compliance with approved document B in some detail?
It does, yes.
Yeah. And if we go to page 25, we can see slide 25. It says here, Celotex RS 5000 key properties. And then in the penultimate bullet point it says, suitable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height. And if we go to the next slide, 26, it says, product proposition, that's the banner, The first, in red, PIR board to successfully meet the performance criteria in BR 135, also in red, for insulated rain screen cladding systems, therefore acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres, also in red, in height. Do you accept, sitting here, that the words therefore acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height suggests that it's generally suitable for use above 18 metres?
Yes.
In other words, because it's passed the test, it can be used in any rain screen cladding above 18 metres?
It could be read that way, yes.
Yeah. Let's go back a little bit in the slideshow, please, to pages 11 to 14, slides 11 to 14, and I'm just going to take these quickly. On page 11, we can see fire spread in building envelopes, and there we have Knowsley Heights, 1991, and if we turn the next page on, Basingstoke, 1992, and the next one on 13, this is Irvine in 1999, with a fatality and a parliamentary inquiry, and then in the last one, at 14, we can see Dubai 2012. Do you remember what you were told about each of those fires, or all of them together?
I think it was only in relation to why it was important to have a BS 8414 test and what could go wrong if that wasn't followed.
I see. So this was as it was a warning from history.
I think that was the idea, yes.
Did you know about any of these fires before this presentation?
I can't be sure. I may have known about one or two, but I wouldn't have known about the reasons behind the fire or the materials used. No.
Right. Do you remember, and you say about one or two, do you remember any discussion, market intelligence, what people were saying in the cladding industry generally about these fires, or any of them?
Not at this point, no.
Did there come a point when you did hear information in market intelligence of that nature?
I may have heard things sort of later, sort of within my tenure at Celotex.
What sort of things?
Well, just a general sort of view about materials being used, insulants, panels. I mean, some of those fires, I think, were glazed systems. It wasn't just a risk from insulants, for instance.
Was there any discussion, either at this presentation or at any time, in fact, to the effect that these fires were well known to Celotex's customer base?
I can't be sure.
Looking at the Dubai slide, which is on the screen in front of us, here we can see an image of the fire at Tamwheel Tower. But in fact, did you know that there were actually other fires, a spate of fires in Dubai or the UAE in the period 2012 to 13?
I wasn't aware. No.
You weren't. Was there any discussion about what materials were used in the Dubai fire on the exterior of the building?
No.
There were also Dubai fires in 2015 and 16, which I think was covered in some depth by industry publications at the time, such as The Address and The Torch. Were you aware of those?
I was aware of those, yes.
Right. Were you aware that in those fires the external cladding had ignited and caused flame spread up the exterior of the building?
I don't remember the exact details, but I remember it being in the press. You know, this was a good few years after I'd left the company.
Right. Was there any discussion at the time of this presentation about the use of polyethylene as a core for aluminium composite panels or other metal composite panels?
Nothing that I recall, no.
Were you in general aware of the danger presented by aluminium composite material with a polyethylene core?
Not specifically, no.
Was there any discussion at this presentation about whether aluminium composite panels with a polyethylene core could be used as part of a system incorporating RS 5000?
I don't think it was mentioned, no.
Mr. Chairman, we're still in the slides. I've probably got about 5 minutes or so, or maybe a little bit more on the slideshow before we turn to a different topic.
Would you like to finish this topic?
That would be very helpful.
Mr. Roome, are you happy to go on for another 10 minutes before we have a break?
Of course, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Can we then turn to slide 19 in this slide pack, please? This is the product range, 5,000 range features, and you can see an arrow with dots which increase in size from approvals to thermal. Do the dots which grow in size indicate their relative importance in some way?
I can't be sure. I didn't write this slide.
No. Was there any discussion then on this slide about each of these topics?
There's potentially a discussion about each of these topics, but whether or not they grew in relevance, I couldn't tell you.
Okay. I mean, what do we take from the fact that fire is in the middle? It's above approvals or larger than approvals and environmental, but smaller or below than emissivity and thermal.
I couldn't tell you why that was placed as it was.
Right. Did you take the impression away from the presentation that thermal performance was more important than fire safety? Looking at this slide in particular.
I wouldn't have deduced that, no.
Can we go to slide 27, please, in this deck, page 27? This is a diagram of a system. Did you understand what this was?
Yes.
What was it?
It's a section through a wall as if you're standing at the edge of a wall and looking at each of the components that made up a wall as if you cut a slice through it.
And it says Celotex and BR135. Perhaps we can blow it up a little bit more. Did you understand that this was the system that had passed the BS8414 test in May 2014?
I think this image may have been taken from the test report.
Was there any discussion at the presentation about what this image did represent?
I think it must have been discussed, yes, as to the build-up, so how it was used in the actual fire test that was carried out.
Now, let's just look at it a little bit more closely. It identifies the helping hand bracket, and then if one casts the eye down a little bit more, then there's a 12mm Marley Eternit Natura panel as the rain screen. Just pausing there, that's a cementitious fibreboard, isn't it? Or was?
It's well, as far as my knowledge allows me to know, it's a decorative panel that's used on in cladding.
And then below that, there's reference to a 12mm magnesium oxide board that would sit behind the insulation towards or on the concrete wall, and then a Simcoe system, and then an aluminium continuous rail, and then you can see 100mm Celotex RS 5000 insulation. So did you understand at this presentation that that was the build-up of the individual components and their dimensions that had passed the BS8414 test in May 2014?
That's correct, because that was the information that was also provided in all of the literature, the breakdown of the build-up.
It was, and we will come to that. Can I ask you then to go to CEL 301027 at page 35. This is the witness statement of Dean O'Sullivan, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Celotex. And I'd like you to look with me, please, at paragraph 118.5 on that page, just below halfway down. I'll read it to you. He says, in the course of work following the Grenfell Tower fire, information came to light which suggests that there were differences between the system as tested and that described in the BRE reports and the Celotex product literature for RS 5000. In particular, I now understand that the system on which the test was conducted in May 2014 included another component, in addition to the components described in the previous subparagraph. At certain levels in the tested system, namely adjacent to the Lamatherm fire barrier at level 2 and at the top of the rig, the outer cladding panel was an 8mm Marley Eternit cladding panel, and at those levels only, there was immediately behind this panel a 6mm magnesium oxide board. 12mm Marley Eternit cladding panels were used on the remainder of the rig. Were you aware at the time of the August presentation that an additional layer of 6 millimetres of magnesium oxide had been used at the thermocouples and at the top of the rig when tested in May 2014.
I was not, no.
So just going back then to slide 27 in light of that answer, if we can, that's CEL 408668 at page 27, looking at the diagram of the test as presented to you, can we take it that you weren't told, indeed nobody was told at that presentation, about the use of the 6 millimetres magnesium oxide that has been referred to, as we've seen by Mr. O'Sullivan in his witness statement?
We had not been told any of that, no.
And ditto in relation to the 8 millimetres of Marley Eternit board at the thermocouples?
Correct. We were just literally shown the documentation that you see before you.
Were you ever told subsequently, during your time at Celotex, that the rig actually tested by the BRE had a 6 millimetre magnesium oxide board behind 8 millimetres of Marley Eternit panel at the thermocouples and at the top of the rig?
I didn't know any of this whilst I was with Celotex, no.
Right. Had you ever come across a cladding system in real life which had incorporated a 12 millimetre magnesium oxide substrate?
On which face?
On the place you see it in the diagram there.
At the back of the insulation?
Yes.
It's what's known as a sheathing board. So you have your metal METSEC or steel frame system spanning between the slabs, the concrete floors, and then that might be filled with insulation on a modern build, and then you close that exterior cavity with a sheathing board, and magnesium oxide was one of those types of products.
Had you ever come across the use of a fibre cement rain screen panel as the rain screen panel?
No, it was just one of many panels that were on the market. I can't tell you implicitly that I had come across those types of panels before.
Right. Mr. Chairman, that's a convenient moment from the perspective of my question.
Good. All right. Well, we're going to have a short break now, Mr. Roome. We'll come back at 20 to 12. And I'm going to say this every time you leave the room. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything related to it while you're out of the room.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Would you like to go with the usher? Then we'll see you in at 20 to 12.
Thank you.
Thank you. 20 to 12, please. Yes, would you ask Mr. Roome to come back in, please? All right, Mr. Roome, ready to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roome, can I now ask you to go, please, to CEL 403422? I'm going to turn to the topic of the BR135 investigation. Now, this document here is your month-end report of November 2014, and I'd like you to look, please, at slide 4 in that document. That is entitled CPD's Stroke Architect Activity Overview. And underneath other activity, you can see in the second bullet point, it says BRE, RS 5000 testing and BS 8414 stroke BR135 investigation. What does the BS 8414 / BR135 investigation mean or refer to there?
I think if it's the meeting I can recall, it was with Stephen Howard from the BRE. So Debbie had arranged a meeting, Debbie Berger, who was the product manager who took over from Jonathan Roper later down the line, to really, and I tagged along because it was a meeting to look at the best way to find out how that product could be further developed or further tested to meet the questions that were coming out from the market.
I follow. This is you say a meeting with Stephen Howard from the BRE. Was that in early November 2014?
I can't recall the exact
We'll come to some
date.
documents
Okay.
later, but in general terms, is it the one that originated from your attendance at the CWCT general meeting in October?
Possibly, yeah.
Right.
There was only ever one meeting that I attended at the BRE.
Right. While we're on that slide, can you just explain the last bullet point, RIBA Guerrilla Tactics event?
The RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architecture, they had an event called the Guerrilla Tactics event, and apologies, I can't remember exactly what that entailed.
Right. Okay. Leaving aside the spelling of guerrilla,
Apologies.
I'm assuming it's as a reference to the kind of guerrilla that wages war rather than anything else. Does one get the impression from that there was some kind of discussion about an aggressive marketing strategy alongside the RIBA?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just an event that I may have attended or was intended to attend.
All right. Can we then turn to the marketing of RS 5000? Go to RBK 59351, please. This is a document produced by the British Standards Institute entitled Don't Be a Flaming Liability, Memo to Manufacturers. And we think that it dates back to the late 1980s. But it was certainly going the rounds in RBKC's Building Control Department at the end of 2013, Mr. Roome. Just looking at it, it's a fairly memorable document. Is it a document that you think you've ever seen before?
I can't recall seeing that image or that document, no.
Right. Just to look at the detail of it briefly then, on page 1, if you look at the left-hand column in the first paragraph there, it says that any information regarding the fire characteristics of materials, products, structures or systems must be clear, accurate and adequate. Do you accept that principle?
Yeah, I would agree.
Was it a principle that was part of Celotex's culture at the time you were there, do you think?
I couldn't comment.
Well, you could comment.
I could comment.
I'd like you to.
Okay. At least on the surface, that would follow. Yeah.
Would follow on the surface as a matter of logic. It's certainly desirable. Did it happen? Was it a principle within Celotex that its marketing information relating to the characteristics of materials, products, structures or systems should be clear, accurate and adequate?
I had no reason to question otherwise.
Right. At the bottom of the right-hand column on the same page, you can see that it says, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Seek expert advice on how to present information on fire performance. To your knowledge, did Celotex ever seek advice about how it should present its information about fire performance?
I couldn't tell you.
I say to your knowledge, so that's a no.
That's a no, yeah.
Right. Can we go to page 4 then? Page 4 sets out some points to bear in mind when writing about fire characteristics. Can you see that? In the first paragraph, it says, do not use terminology which makes a claim which cannot be substantiated. And then the second one is, may give a misleading impression of performance. Were you aware as a marketing or salesperson that that was an important principle when writing about fire characteristics?
Yes, about any characteristics, I'd say.
Looking at the right-hand column, paragraph 4, avoid coining brand or trade names which may misleadingly imply fire safety. Were you aware that that was something that was important to keep in mind when writing marketing literature?
I don't know.
And what about 5? Avoid vague implications that the material complies with British standards, building regulations, etc. Again, was that a principle that you were alive to as essentially a prohibition when writing marketing literature?
I've never had to write marketing literature.
When presenting the product to the public?
Well, yeah, myself personally, I would always promote or present the facts that were available to me.
And I take it from your last answer is that these precepts were never discussed within Celotex when it came to how to present RS5000 to the UK construction market.
If they were, it was not something that I was privy to.
Can we go back to the agenda then, to the 5th August presentation? This is at CEL 409709. There it is, and you can see that there is, as a 4th item down after the coffee break, a marketing communications plan to be presented by LS. Who was LS?
That would have been Lizzie Seaton.
Lizzie Seaton, yes. And Lizzie Seaton's role at the time, I think, has been explained by other Celotex witness statements, but could you just tell us what it was?
She was part of the marketing team. And maybe at that time she may have headed up the marketing team under Paul Evans.
Can we then go to CEL 408668 again, please, which is the launch presentation slides, and this time go to page 38. This is a slide called Creative Concept. What did that mean?
I think these were the images that would be used in advertising within trade journals.
I see. And you can see that it's based around the tagline, Achieving New Heights. You see, Celotex, reaching new heights. Yes?
Yes.
And is that a reference to the fact that RS5000 was being marketed for the above 18-metre market?
I think that's correct, yes.
Right. And indeed, it's right that it actually emphasises, I think, above 18-metre applications, if you look at the text at the top right-hand corner of the slide.
Yes.
And it's a first for PIR.
Correct.
We don't see any caveats in there, do we?
No.
And when it says in the second bullet point that above 18-metre applications, plural, was that really right? Because in fact it could only have one application, namely within the system tested.
That's correct.
So actually, above 18-metre applications in the plural would have been misleading, or was misleading, wasn't it, if presented to potential customers?
I suppose at that specific time, that's correct.
Yes. Was there any discussion about that point?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Was the marketing strategy for RS5000 if essentially to emphasise, as its selling hook, if you like, that it could be used above 18 metres?
I think that's the predominant reason why that particular product was created and marketed.
If we move on to page 40, 2 pages on, or 2 slides on, as part of the general section, marketing support, within the slideshow, this makes a reference to case studies here. Do you see the third bullet point down?
Yes.
What was that about? What did that indicate?
I think that would have been a reference to particular projects, where the product had been used or would be used. But at that time, I don't think there were any case studies that I knew of.
Presumably because RS5000 hadn't been used yet, because it hadn't been launched yet.
Exactly.
Right. So the idea was that there would later be case studies.
I think that's what that means.
And
yes.
what would those case studies involve?
A lot of the time within Celotex, there was often a sort of a one-page, almost like a flyer, as it were, which would just explain the project, the application, and a bit of information about the project.
When you say a flyer, you mean a piece of paper which would tell customers about past projects in which RS5000 had been used or was being planned?
Correct.
Right. What would be studied within a case study?
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but it would just generally be a few facts about the project, the product, and the application.
I see. Was there any discussion at this launch presentation about what those case studies would actually involve?
Not at that time, no. There had been preceding case studies with other Celotex products.
Would that include FR5000?
It may have done. I can't recall the exact details.
Right. And if we go on to page 57 in this slide pack, this slide is headed Routes to Market. And we can see that there are 2 little light bulbs in a cloud and a balloon in the middle. And on the left-hand side, we can see underneath the technical drawing there, pull, e.g. architects, contractors, installers. And then on the right-hand side, underneath the SIG insulation brand logo, push, e.g. distributors, merchants. Just pausing with the logo of SIG, was SIG a major distributor for Celotex?
It was one of a few major distributors of Celotex and other insulation products and other construction products.
Did the marketing strategy rely in part on getting distributors to push RS5000?
I think it was. I mean, I don't know. I didn't have and deal with the strategy at all, but I can only imagine that it was something to do with them stocking the product, for instance.
Was there any discussion about what incentives Celotex would give to distributors such as SIG?
I think, I'm not sure if it's part of this presentation, but there was there's some sort of competition to do with you would win a balloon ride for X amount of people if you'd bought the material or distributed or stocked the material. It may be later in this presentation as part of the marketing pack.
And that would be a generic incentive for all distributors. Was there a plan to give specific distributors specific incentives?
Not that I know of, no.
And on the left-hand side, it looks like you were wanting to get architects and other professionals to specify RS5000 as a pull factor. Would that be fair?
I think that's the general marketing idea of the product.
And if we go to page 32, back a little bit in the slide pack, you can see that the heading of this slide is Celotex Rain Screen Cladding Solutions, below 18 metres, you can see RS 5000, above 18 metres, RS 5000, and 4000 not above 18 metres, as you can see there. And in the last bullet point, it says incurred substantial development costs. Is that a reference to the development costs of RS 5000 itself? It looks like it. Can you confirm?
I can't confirm, but it might be deduced that that is the case.
Did you get the sense that the sales team was under pressure to achieve sales of RS 5000 in order to recoup those development costs?
No,
Were you ever instructed to offer discounts to customers to achieve sales?
no,
Were you ever rewarded on the basis of how many successful sales that you made of
No.
RS 5000?
no.
Was there a particular bonus for selling RS 5000 that you would expect, or anyone in the sales team would expect?
Not that I can remember, no.
Right. Can I then turn to the question of market knowledge? Can we go to CEL 403543, please? This is an email from you to Debbie Berger. Is it Berger or Berger?
Burger,
Berger.
yeah.
And Paul Evans on the 11th of February 2015. The subject, RS 5000 spin presentation. Hi Debs stroke Paul, please find slides that you can consider for use in the spin meeting on Friday. I've tried to keep it as simplified as possible. Let me know how you get on. Now spin has got capital letters. What does it stand for?
It was an acronym. Celotex had a lot of acronyms,
Yes.
and this was some sort of management tier group that met, I don't know if it's every Friday or every month. I don't know what they were looking at, maybe development of products generally or marketing or what have you, but it was not something I was involved in directly.
Now you refer to the slides there. They are at CEL 403544. Just to show you what they are, and they're entitled RS 5000 Market Analysis. And just go to the first page to refresh your memory of the document. You see, it says, I see the market for RS 5000 being split into 3 defined potential customer tiers. Now, before we look at the document a little bit further, had these slides that you were sending Debbie Berger and Paul Evans been prepared by you alone?
They had, yes.
They had. When do you think you prepared them?
I can't be sure. I mean, I think the email, did it say the February 2015?
11th of February.
So it'd have been, leading up to that.
What caused or prompted you to produce these slides?
I think it was due to the feedback that I was getting from specialists, contractors, architects, and the questions that they were raising, regular sort of repetitive questions that were coming up, and I wanted to put it into some sort of format. Because I was in London, it seemed to be a lot of the major contractors and the major specialists and major architects were involved in high-rise buildings. So I wanted to distill the information and present it in a form that I could give to the management to explain what I saw was needed with the product.
Right. So you made these slides off your own bat?
Yes, I did.
You weren't asked to do it by John Roper, for example?
No.
Right. Can we then look at the slides in a little bit more detail? I've shown you page 2. You see, I see the market for RS 5000 being split, you say. That was your personal view, was it?
That was my personal view, yes.
And over the next 3 slides, we can see them. There's 3 defined potential customer tiers, and you've given them a traffic light colouring, haven't you? Red, no use, tier 1. And as we'll flip to slide 2, which is amber. Is this right? Limited use. And then the third slide, or third tier, page 5, green, use, tier 3. Yes?
Yes.
Now let's just we'll go back to these. Just looking at slide 3 then, which is tier 1. Let's just look at that together a little bit more closely. You say there, tier 1, no use, and you can see the view is only use non or limited combustibility insulation product using guidance set out in approved document B of the building regulations. Reason, easiest route to compliance. Not happy with current test data on combustible insulation products, PIR phenolic having enough satisfactory evidence of performance in broad spread of applications, field of application tests. And then influencer, client, insurer, building control, specialist consultant. Now, just looking at the reason list, in the second bullet point, you identify one of them as their unhappiness with current test data having evidence of performance in broad spread of applications. Does that mean that the market, this particular part of the market, was refusing to use, or would refuse to use, RS 5000 because there wasn't enough satisfactory evidence of performance in a broad spread of applications? In other words, applications beyond the very test in which it had been proved to pass.
That's correct. There was only a singular test at that point, and some people, and this is literally just feedback from questions I was being asked or statements that were being made, that some people wanted to see a wider spread of tested applications.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, as you said before, this is how you saw the market at that time.
That's correct. Yes.
And looking at influencer, you've identified as the fourth bullet point specialist consultant. Was that a reference to specialist fire consultants or specialist facade consultants?
All encompassing, basically, yes.
And building control. Did you understand that there were building control officers who were not happy with the available test data?
I can't be specific to any one particular building control body, but yes.
Indeed. If we can then turn to slide 4, tier 2, the amber tier, limited use. View, consider use of combustible insulation. Reason, cost, restricted wall space, happy that they have enough test data to satisfy influencers, and then influencer, main contractor, subcontractor, building control, and again, a specialist consultant. Looking at the list of customers who would consider use of combustible insulation, does that mean that they might sometimes use it and might sometimes not?
If the application was correct, so if potentially if the building was below 18 metres, for instance.
Right. And you can see under the list of influencers that it still includes specialist consultants, but there is no insurer there referred to.
No.
Is there a significance in that?
Not that I can remember, no.
Does it tell us that insurers, if they had any part in the decision-making process as to what should go on the building, would generally take a very negative view of RS 5000?
I don't think that was the case, no.
Right. How can you account for the absence of insurers then in that list?
I can't give you a reason, unfortunately.
We see the appearance of subcontractors in that list. Does that tell us that, although they weren't in the red list, they do appear in the orange list? Does that tell us that subcontractors tend to be a little bit more amenable to using RS 5000?
I don't think so. I think it was more to do with them being on sort of low-rise buildings below 18 metres, because this document wasn't just for above 18 metres in particular.
And then if you go to slide 5, tier 3, it's green, tier 3 use, view, always use combustible insulation. Reason, cost, 18 metre restriction not relevant, below 18 metres, not aware of 18 metre restriction, always use combustible insulation materials, restricted wall space, and then influencer, main contractor, subcontractor, building control. Now, Mr. Roome, you said a moment ago the document was not just for 18 metres in particular, but the traffic light system was very strongly focused on the above 18 metre, below 18 metre usage, wasn't it?
It was referenced, yes.
Well, it's more than reference. It's a critical factor, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. And if we look at tier 3, customers who always use combustible insulation, under reasons, you list as one reason, not aware of 18 metre restriction. Were you aware from your survey at this time that there were customers out there using, or who might use, RS 5000 above 18 metres because they didn't know about the restrictions on use above 18 metres?
I can't give you any specific reference, but it seemed to be that some, and this is just market intelligence, not specifically using the RS product, but preceding that, things like the Kingspan type of products. There seemed to be contractors out there that had been using these types of products for sort of 10 odd years.
Right. And the influences now, as we can see, are main contractor, subcontractor, building control, but no reference to specialist specialist consultant advising them. Do we take it from that list that the less their technical knowledge and expertise, the more likely that you'd be able to sell RS5000?
I don't think it was a real sort of a reference to sales. It was just more to do with, you know, my understanding of the market, because the later slides show my views about what investment the company needed to make to help strengthen the products in the marketplace.
I mean, if there's a single thing one can derive from this slide show, these three slides, these three tiers, is it this, that the more ignorant of the restrictions above 18 metres and the less equipped to ask difficult technical questions, the more likely it was that you'll be able to achieve sales of RS5000?
I wouldn't have put it like that, no.
How would you put it?
This was my view of the market, and this was my understanding. It wasn't any sort of sales tool or targeting. It was just my understanding of who was out there.
Did you not see at the time a connection between green use and lack of awareness of lack of awareness of the 18-metre restriction and the absence of a specialist consultant? Did you not see a connection between the two?
Not really, no.
It's an obvious connection to make, isn't it, with respect?
Well, I mean, I could have put all of the influencers in each of those three tiers quite easily. I don't know why I used them in that respect or like that, laid it out like that.
One of the other reasons in the middle column, in that green column there, is cost. Were you aware of cost as a driver for the likelihood that RS5000 would be used?
Not in particular, it's just cost generally, which was a consideration for those types of products, because being thermally more efficient, they needed less of the material compared to a non-combustible solution. So by having something like mineral wool in there as opposed to a PIR phenolic type board, it meant that it was a wider system, a deeper system as it were, and would therefore need, it would lead to a heavier weight on the facade, and it would have knock-on effects to the cost of the structure as well, supporting.
So what was the relevance of cost as the reason for use?
Because it was a lighter, more thermally efficient system, these types of products.
That's not cost, that's performance. What was the relevance of cost?
Well, because cost is linked to performance because of the application. Because if you use a thinner, more thermally efficient board, then you have a less weighty system, which then requires fixings and materials to support that system of less, I suppose it would be less robust, so therefore less cost. Generally, the whole thing would be less costly.
Yeah, I see. And if we look at the next slide on page 6, we can see some project examples. And project examples of RS5 in Tier 2 and Tier 3 are RS5000. We see clearly no RS5000 in Tier 1. We do see mineral wool. We also see RS5000 in Tier 2, and we also see it in Tier 3. Do you remember which projects RS5000 was being used on in Tier 2?
I can't recall, no.
What about Tier 3? This is February 15, remember?
Only the one that I've detailed there, which was a low-rise building.
Was that Arsenal Youth Academy?
That's correct.
I see. Is that single project then? It's a single project. So Arsenal Youth Academy being built by Century Facades using RS5000.
That's correct, yeah.
Right. If we go to slide 7, which is the next page, please, we can see you set out next steps, which are do nothing in red, medium investment in yellow, and large investment in green. You see that?
I do.
You identify a risk under do nothing, but in fact it's referred to in all 3 columns, that a change in the market may outlaw use of combustible insulation in facades above 18 metres. You see that?
I do, yes.
Yes. Did you have any specific basis for considering that as a risk?
I think it's only from people who were giving me feedback of those who only used non-combustible materials.
If we look at the final slide, slide 9, you can see you've set out a personal view there. Again, that's your personal view. Was that to support your view that there should be medium investment in developing RS 5000?
As a salesperson, it was my view that to be able to support the sale of this type of product in the marketplace, these were the things that people were asking for. And I was expecting the company to invest in the development or the further development of the product to get different certification, which I outline here, to make it a product that was more readily saleable by myself and my colleagues within the sales team.
I think that's a long way of saying yes. You wanted medium investment, which corresponded to the middle column in the slide before.
Yes.
Yes. And let's just look at your reasons. You say, I think we should at least invest in a BBA. Is that a BBA certificate?
That's correct.
And is a BBA certificate, from your experience, a key that unlocks the market?
It's one of the significant documents, yes.
Yeah. And then you say, if we do not have a BBA, the only proof that RS 5000 has gone through the BS 8414 testing is to show evidence face-to-face with influencer with the BRE test report. Now, this is February 2015. Was showing evidence face-to-face with an influencer with the BRE test report a problem, did you think, at that time?
Well, it's something I could not do because I did not have the test report.
Did you not?
No, not the one, the all-encompassing one that I later found that was what was being requested.
Did you think at the time you'd made this slideshow, 11th of February 15, that you needed the full, as it turns out, 33-page BRE test report in order to be able to have the discussion with the influencer?
I thought so. I didn't quite understand that initially when the product was launched, there was, I don't know if you're going to present this, but there were different versions of the report. There was a truncated version, a 4-page one, which just literally distilled the information about the build-up and the test and the signatory behind the test. There was a 12-page version which had a bit more information about images of the build-ups. And then I later found out, after I'd left the company, that there had actually been a full report with photographs of the crib and before and after photographs, which enlightened me as to the test, basically, and how it was built, which you've alluded to with the extra material that had been added.
Yes, and we'll come to those 3 different documents later on in your evidence. But just on this document at the moment, it looks from the second bullet point that you are telling Debbie Berger and Paul Evans that in the absence of a BBA certificate, you would have to show evidence face-to-face with an influencer with the BRE test report, which would either be the 12-page version or the 4-page version, and that would be a problem. I mean, it looks from this as if that would be a problem or undesirable. Is that fair?
Well, undesirable for me because I don't have the information to hand. I wanted confidence that I could give to the specifier.
I see. So, I see. So the problem from a sales perspective is getting into technical details you might not be able to explain or stand by.
Yes, you could put it like that, yeah.
Can we then look at the penultimate bullet point? You say, in London, I'm seeing my fair share of high-rise projects. Almost all of the larger developments that I'm involved with have specialist consultants and influencers who are highly knowledgeable of the ADB and fire regs above 18 metres. Just pausing on that, does that tell us, or were you telling Debbie Berger and Paul Evans, that customer expertise was a barrier to market entry which needed investment?
Yeah, I'd say yes.
Now, at the time, and we're going to come to this in some more detail later, Mr. Roome, but did you consider that consideration applied to Grenfell Tower from your dealings on the project to date?
Not implicitly, no.
No. Looking at the last bullet point, if we're not prepared to validate the use of RS5000 on projects, as one of our competitors is doing, it is inevitable that we will not be able to play in the market of most of the larger developers in London on 18-metre plus high-rise facades. And the reason for that is it seems, is this right, is that those projects had knowledgeable specialist consultants who wouldn't accept RS5000.
It's because of the lack of the range of testing or the certification at that point when the product was launched. It did not have any further certification other than that one particular test report. And most of the clients I was dealing with in London were looking for that extra information, as it were.
And that wasn't a problem, though, that you were encountering on smaller projects, is that right?
Well, on low-rise projects, it wasn't an issue.
No, but you're dealing with high-rise projects here.
Some of the high-rise, I was giving all the information I had to people, and they were processing it and involving specialists if they needed to.
Was Celotex, in effect, relying on the lack of expert knowledge or technical expertise within the industry to achieve specifications?
I don't think that was the case, no.
Now, let's look at CEL 401096. This is a further presentation that you sent on the 1st of May to various colleagues, including Mr. Roper, I think. And is this a document that you prepared?
Is this the one titled RS5000 Market Analysis?
Yes.
On the screen? I need to see the... So it's gone blank?
Yes, it'll come back, don't worry.
Okay.
So, yes, this is the email from you to a number of people at Celotex, including John Roper, you see?
Yes.
And the subject is Region Meeting RS5000 presentation. And you say, "Hi team, please find attached my presentation relating to RS5000, the competition and introduction to the BS 8414 testing. If you have any questions or you find that you need advice, please let me know." And let's look at that presentation. That is at CEL 401097. And it's entitled RS5000 Product Training. Is that the slide show that you attached to this email?
That's correct, yes.
And if we look on, it says at page 12, BS 8414, and then sets out the summary of the classification for a BS 8414 Part 2 system. You see that?
I do. Yes.
And external fire spread and internal fire spread are there identified. And if you look at page 14, slide 14, we can see the guidance set out in BCA Technical Guidance Note 18, issue 0 from June 2014 that you and I looked at earlier on this morning.
Yes.
So can we take it from that by this time, this is 1st of May 2014, 15, sorry, you were well aware of the above 18 metre requirements and the details about the tests?
I was, yes.
Yes. And if we go to page 18 in that, if we can see slide 18, and here again we see this, within this slide deck is your 11th of February slide deck that you'd originally sent to Debbie Berger and Paul Evans.
That's correct.
With the 3 tiers. Do you see that?
Yes.
And if we look on, we can see page 19, tier 1, page 20, tier 2, page 21, tier 3. But then if we look on to page 22, there are some project examples. We had those before, but we look on again to page 23. We don't see. In fact, that's the end of the slide. There is no page 23. And my point to put to you is that we don't see your personal view or the next steps that you'd originally included in your slides.
No.
No. Do you know why that is? Why did you take those out?
I think it was common knowledge about what my opinion was, and that last slide was really for the management team to explain to them the investment that they needed to make. This was more of a presentation to the to my colleagues in the southern sales team, really about a bit more information that I'd sort of put together myself in layman terms almost, about the testing procedure and the way in which I saw the market, exactly the same as before. My team were well aware, well, my team, the team that I was within, were quite well aware of what I wanted or what I would like to be seen to be done within the company to invest further within that product.
But what your colleagues didn't get was your views in the last slide we saw, which justified your argument, if I can put it that way, for a medium investment, including the difficulty with presenting BS 8414 tests results to influences, and the last 2 bullet points on that slide we saw.
But we'd already spoken about that. It's, you know, we're quite a cohesive team, and it was quite well known about my views.
So can we take it that people like John Roper would have been familiar with the views you had been expressing in that slide, even though you hadn't included it in this slide deck?
Yeah, by that stage, John Roper was in the southern sales team, so he'd transitioned across, and then Debbie Berger had backfilled his position in product management. So any questions that would have come to light, I had John Roper there from the sort of the technical product management standpoint, although he was now in a different position within sales.
Now, turning then to the question of marketing materials, can we go to paragraph 6 of your witness statement, please? And you can see that you say there, and this is back to the 5th of August meeting. At the meeting, I was provided with the RS 5000 marketing material to pass to potential customers. This meeting was the first time I'd been provided with details about the product. However, I was aware a few weeks earlier that a new product was in the offing. I think you were provided, weren't you, on that occasion, with the compliance guide and the specification guide, among other documents. Is that right?
Correct. There was about, I think, 4 or 5
yes.
documents that were initially released.
Yes.
From the marketing team.
Indeed, and they've been listed in your statement and indeed elsewhere. Let's just look at the compliance guide first, please. CEL 6012. And if we can go to page 2 in that document, you can see what the guide says. At the very top of the page, next to the pink box, it says, this document provides guidance on complying with approved document B2, ADB2, for external wall cladding systems fixed to steel frame or masonry constructions. It provides a step-by-step guide to an alternative route to compliance for ADB2 through meeting the performance criteria set out in BR 135, through testing to BS 84141 2002 or BS 84142 2005. I'm assuming that this document was given to you at the marketing launch, at the launch meeting on the 5th of August. Had you seen it before that time?
I had not, no.
Did you get an opportunity at that meeting to read this document thoroughly, or these documents as a suite?
No, we were presented with them after the fact. I think I can't remember exactly whether it's before or after the meeting, but not enough for us to digest the data within it. It was presented to us as part of that launch presentation that you showed us earlier.
Yeah. And when we look at the word step-by-step guide to an alternative route to compliance, did you understand when you saw this document, whether it was at the meeting or later, that it was an alternative to satisfying the combustibility requirements in section 12.7 and table A7 of approved document B?
I think that was what was covered in the meeting, yes.
I was going to ask you that. There was discussion in the meeting about that, was there?
I can't be absolutely sure, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure, yeah.
So just so we're not in any doubt about it, you were clear in your mind at this point, seeing this document, that RS 5000 would not provide a linear route to compliance, i.e. that it was not a material of limited combustibility.
Correct, yes.
And if we look at page 3 in the far right-hand column of that document, it says there, underneath the 3 little bullet arrows, the classification applies only to the system as tested and detailed in the classification report. The classification report can only cover the details of the system as tested. It cannot state what is not covered. When specifying or checking a system, it is important to check that the classification documents cover the end-use application. And then if you turn on to page 4, in the middle column, we can see the system that was actually tested, and there's the diagram or drawing we looked at before, which was contained in the slideshow presented by John Roper at the launch meeting, I think, as you told us. And again, there's no mention in there of an additional layer of 6 millimetres of magnesium oxide, is there?
Correct.
And there's no mention in there of a layer or level of 8 millimetre Marley Eternit Natura cementitious fibreboard as the cladding material, is
Correct.
there? Yeah. And again, I'm assuming that you didn't twig that they were in there because you didn't know. No one had discussed it.
I had no reason to think that that was not what was shown.
Did or do you remember any discussion between you and John Roper or Paul Evans or anybody else you dealt with, which led you to think that this was indeed the system as constructed? In other words, did they actually tell you anything in addition to the documents that we've seen, which would have led you to think that this test rig, as identified in Figure 4 on this page, was the test rig that was tested?
No, I had no other conversations. This was what was presented to all of the sales teams, myself and my colleagues.
Now, can we turn to CEL 6013? This is the specification guide. And the questions I'm about to ask you are pretty similar to those I've been asking you for the last few minutes, but let's just go through the document. If we look at page 5 of this document, we can see under the heading building above 18 metres, this is just below the left-hand pink box that says Celotex RS 5000 has been successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 2 2005 fire performance of external cladding systems. And then under building above 18 metres, it says Celotex RS 5000 has been successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 2 2005, etc. Meets the criteria set out in BR 135 and is therefore acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height. And it goes on to clarify in the third paragraph right-hand column that the fire performance and classification report for Celotex RS 5000 only relates to the components detailed above. Any changes to the components listed will need to be considered by the building designer. Is it fair to say that this explicitly warns the customer who looks at this document and reads it that RS 5000 can only be used as part of the system as tested?
Correct.
And you understood that at the time?
I did, yes.
Presumably. Now let's look at the components that formed part of the test according to this document, Middle column again, or left-hand column if you like, the system tested to BS 8414, Part 2, 2005 was as follows, and then you've got 6 bullet points. 12mm fibre cement panels, that's the Marley Eternit, supporting aluminium brackets and vertical rails, 100mm of Celotex RS5000, 12mm of non-combustible sheathing board, 100mm of SFS system, and 2 times 12.5mm plasterboard. And again, there's no reference there to an additional 6mm of magnesium oxide or 8mm of Marley fibre cement panels at the thermocouples, is there?
Correct.
So the system tested, it's the system described here, and the components described in this list, was not in fact the system actually tested, was it?
It seems not to have been, no.
No. This is a thoroughly misleading document, isn't it? Even if you did read it thoroughly, or one did read it thoroughly.
It turns out, correct, yes.
Did you realise that at the time?
No, it wasn't until much later when I was asked to attend a meeting with the lawyers for Celotex a couple of years ago with Linklaters that I was finally shown the full test report.
Did you consider at the time that there was a risk that the claim that RS5000 meets the criteria set out in BR135 and is therefore acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres might lead a reader to believe that it was suitable generally in combination with any system?
I didn't have any reason to believe that that was the case, no.
If we go to, well, let me just press you a little bit on that. When it says, as we've seen, and is therefore acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres, I showed you that terminology in the slideshow, and I thought you had accepted that meant that there would be a risk that a reader might think that because it had passed the test, it could be used generally in buildings over 18 metres in height. That is also so, is it not, in respect of this marketing literature?
Looking at it now with hindsight, yes.
Yes. Now, Mr. Hyatt has considered these documents. He's one of the experts who has been enlisted to assist the inquiry, and his opinion is that RS5000, or the claim that RS5000 is acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height, is an erroneous claim. I think you accept that.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, in addition to the specification guide and the compliance guide which we've looked at, Celotex also produced a data sheet for RS5000, didn't it?
It did, yes.
You can look at that. That's at CEL 407961. Can we look at that, please? Was this a document that you received as one which was intended you should send out as your marketing effort, or part of your marketing effort?
I think this was one of the documents was part of the pack that we were given at the launch of the product, yes.
Right. Let's just look at the pink banner at the top of page 1. Celotex RS5000, premium rain screen cladding board, brackets, suitable for buildings above 18 metres in height. Let's turn to the next page, please. Same pink banner, same wording. Note the words in brackets, suitable for buildings above 18 metres in height. Close brackets. Next page, please. Same banner, same wording again. See that?
I do.
Then that's the last page of that document. So we can see this banner, suitable for buildings above 18 metres in height, is repeated on the top of every single page of this data sheet. Yes?
Yes.
And I think it's right to say this is the shortest data sheet or shortest piece of marketing material that the marketing team had in relation to RS5000.
It may have been, yes.
In fact, it's correct, isn't it, that RS5000 was not suitable for buildings over 18 metres unless it formed part of the exact system tested under BR135.
Correct.
And therefore, do you accept that those words at the top of those pages in the banner were apt to lead the reader to think that Celotex RS5000 was suitable for use in all buildings over 18 metres in height?
That would be the case, could be the case, yes.
Again, a thoroughly misleading wording. Do you accept that?
It's not accurate.
It's misleading.
It could be construed as misleading, yes.
But it is misleading because it doesn't contain the caveat.
Yes.
Thank you. And again, this is a point we've revisited now, I think, a number of times, but just on this document, if you go to page 1, please, under introduction, we can see the now familiar wording after the reference to the test. In the fourth line, it says the first PIR insulation board to meet the performance criteria in BR135 for insulated rain screen cladding systems. And then you see, and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height. And that wording is repeated in the second bullet point, just a little bit lower down, under the words, with Celotex RS 5000 you are specifying an insulation board that. Do you see that?
I do.
And again, same question, do you accept that that wording is potentially misleading because it might lead a reader to think that simply because it had passed a test, it is suitable for any building above 18 metres in height?
Yes, potentially.
Yes. Let's look at CEL 40's 7961, please.
Well, it's actually worse than that in the end, isn't it? Because if we go back to page 3, which deals with certification, I think there it tells us that the system, it gives us some details about the system tested, which are just not correct.
In relation to what is now known,
Yes.
I agree.
It is not a correct description of the system that was tested.
I agree, yes.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, yes, and that was my next question.
Sorry, again.
No, I think that, and just to follow up on and finalise that, that's because it doesn't mention the 6 millimetres magnesium oxide.
Correct.
Yes. In fact, taken as a suite, would you say that the Celotex marketing materials you were given were misleading about RS 5000 and its use, suitability and safety above 18 metres?
It looks so, yes.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to look with you at some examples of marketing communications, if we can. Can we go to CEL 50407? This is a press release. And it was prepared, we think, for the launch of RS 5000. Are you familiar with this document, Mr. Roome, do you think?
I'm not familiar, but I knew of its existence.
And who wrote it, do you think?
I should imagine it's the product management and marketing team.
Right. It's entitled Celotex Reaching New Heights. Celotex launched premium performance PIR solution for rain screen cladding. So that's the catch line, or the strap line. And then in the second paragraph, it says, the latest addition to the 5000 series product range, Celotex RS 5000, has successfully tested to BS 8414 Part 2 2005, meets the criteria set out in BR 135, and therefore is acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height. Now, just looking at that, am I right in assuming, I think, that you weren't involved in wording this document?
That's correct.
Did you see it at the time, do you think?
Sorry, did I?
Did you see it at the time?
I must have done.
Did you use it? Did you use it to market RS 5000?
Not from my recollection, no. I think it's more, I would have sent out the marketing literature that we'd looked at previously.
And if we look at the last paragraph, I've shown you the second one, and the by now almost mantric wording, therefore acceptable for use. Looking at the last paragraph, it says, Celotex RS 5000, and this is in quotation marks, RS 5000 is the first PIR board to successfully test to BS 8414, making it acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height, close quotes, said John Roper, product manager for Celotex. Now, just pausing there, that quotation, when he says making it acceptable for use in buildings above 18 metres in height, that's misleading, isn't it? Because it tends to suggest that because it has passed the BS 8414 test, it's acceptable for use in any building above 18 metres in height.
Looking at that now, yes.
Yes. And then he goes on, quotes, as a company, we are always looking to innovate and develop solutions for new applications. RS 5000 will allow contractors, architects and specifiers to use premium performance PIR in externally cladded walls for the first time in high-rise constructions. That is a misleadingly general claim, because what is missing is the extremely important caveat that it can only be used if it is used in exactly the same external wall construction as that which had passed the BS 8414 test.
Correct.
Yes. Did you have any concerns at the time about these claims made in these marketing materials and in this press release?
Not at the time, no.
Can we look at INQ 40141100? INQ 30141100. Thank you. This is an article from Specification Online, as we can see from the very top of the document, and it looks like it's dated Tuesday, 22nd of March, 2016. Do you know what caused this to be put out?
I've no idea. Had I left the company by that date?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure I had, hadn't I?
I don't think you actually were there at this time. So you can't help us with this document.
I can't, no.
Well, perhaps it's a document best left for others then. Can we then look at CEL 401382? This is an email sent by Jonathan Roper to you on the 29th of September 2014, as well as to others within Celotex. And it says, all, please find below our standard response on queries regarding RS 5000 and BBA certification. Any questions, please call. You see that?
I do.
He sets out a long-ish text below. You see that? Do you remember being asked by customers about the kinds of things which had led to this standard response?
I can't remember exact questions, but maybe this was put together because I and my colleagues have started to give feedback to the product management team about questions that were being raised.
Right. Now, this is a month or so, perhaps just a little under 2 months after the launch, wasn't it? End of September 14.
Yes.
You can see that John Roper is saying that it's a response on queries regarding RS 5000 and BBA certification. Were customers coming to you and expressing concern that RS 5000 did not have a BBA certificate?
I think that was one of the documents that was being asked for, yes.
Being asked for, were they expressing concern that RS 5000 didn't have such a certificate and that they were encountering problems as a result of not being able to produce it?
I think it was because of my recollection of the events was that the BBA was one of the recognised documents that some insurers were looking for materials going onto buildings generally. And because the product was so new and the timeline of the development of this particular product, they hadn't got a BBA at the time. I don't even know if they had a BBA at all by the end of my tenure within the company. I don't think they did.
Right. Then let's look down at the standard response. We could see the first paragraph, which repeats pretty much verbatim what we've seen in the data sheet and in the specification guide and the compliance guide. We've got the mantra, therefore complies with the requirements of ADB for buildings that exceed 18 metres in height. That's in there. So that was part of the standard response. And then there's a reference in the second paragraph to the NHBC requirements. You see that there?
I do, yes.
And then in the third paragraph, it says, Celotex RS 5000 has current certification from the Building Research Establishment, BRE, confirming the product has met the criteria set out in BR 135 and is therefore acceptable in rain screen cladding system above 18 metres in height. Again, for the same reason that you've given before, do you accept that that is a thoroughly misleading response if it were given to a customer who asked?
Looking at that now, yes.
Yes. Now, coming back to the second paragraph, NHBC standards, there's a reference there to chapter 6.9. Were you familiar with the NHBC standards at the time?
No, not all of them. It was only this particular reference that was, or sorry, this particular chapter that was brought to light at some point, again, within my tenure at Celotex after the launch of RS5000, that I don't know if it's just me, but, customers or potential clients were bringing this to my attention, at least.
Right. So this is end of September 2014. Are you saying that you at the time, and I know you were only one of a number of recipients of this document, but you personally at the time weren't aware of the NHBC standards relating to curtain walling and cladding?
I wasn't, no.
Okay, let me see if I can pinpoint the timing then. If we can go to CEL 401040, please. And we'll come back to this email in just a moment. This is an email from you, dated the 22nd of October 2014, so about 3 weeks after the email we've been looking at, to Debbie Berger and Paul Evans. Hi team, if any of you find yourself in conversations regarding a need for BBA certificate for use of RS5000 on NHBC jobs, you may want to be made aware of the following. And then you set out the guidance at chapter 6.9. You see it there?
I do, yes.
And then if you go over the page to page 2, the email continues. At the top of the page, first bullet point, I've attached a copy of the NHBC Chapter 6 guidance on curtain wall and cladding. And then you say RS5000 is not classed as a whole system, but neither would any other individual component. As far as I know, no one company manufactures a complete rain screen system. I hope you can reference to this document to help counter the argument for the need of a BBA for RS5000 on NHBC projects. So this is 3 weeks after the email you've seen. When do you think you first became aware of the NHBC standard that you're now sending to Debbie Berger and Paul Evans on the 22nd of October 2014?
I can't be sure.
Was it between those two dates, 29th of September and 22nd of October?
I would imagine it must have been, yes.
Right. And you were wanting them to refer to the NHBC guide to counter the argument for the need for a BBA. Why was that?
I think it was just to understand what the NHBC were looking for and what documents that they would accept, either a BBA or a test report. But the option that they could have used either. So really for me, it was for me including this document, sending it to those people, it was to really say to them, look, this is the importance of the likes of having a BBA, for instance. But I was led to believe, I thought that it might be, with the test reports, a way of appeasing the NHBC on schemes where that build-up was being used.
So you knew very well, at least by that time, that it was a system test, not a product test.
Correct, yes.
And we get that from your last paragraph but one. Can we then go back to John Roper's email of the 29th of September that we were looking at before, which is at CEL 401382. And in the third paragraph there, and I've shown you this, I'll show it to you again, it says, Celotex RS5000 has current certification from the Building Research Establishment, confirming the product has met the criteria set out in BR 135 and therefore is acceptable, etc. It says the product has met the criteria, not the system. Is it the case that you and your colleagues in the marketing team were effectively being told...
In the sales team?
In the sales team. We're effectively being told to provide a response as standard that the product has met the criteria, not the system.
I didn't pick up on the wording of that in particular. Looks like it was a statement that we could use, literally copy and paste in response to any queries we were getting.
Indeed. And such a response would be thoroughly misleading because the RS5000 product was never tested, was it? A system which incorporated that product was tested and passed the BR 135 criteria.
Correct, yes.
So again, is this another example of misleading marketing?
With hindsight, it could be construed as such, yes.
Yeah, you've told me with hindsight now a number of times. Can you explain why it didn't occur to you at the time that this was misleading marketing literature taken as a whole, given the impressions that you accept today sitting here, it gave?
I think with the knowledge that I've gleaned since, because I'm still in the same market, I was still, I suppose, new to the whole of insulation, the world of insulation, and I was building up my knowledge as I went. And I was relying on, the specialists within the business, i.e. The product management and the marketing team, to give me and my colleagues guidance as to how to respond to professionals in the industry requesting certain information.
Do you know if you ever gave this response as standard to any customer who asked about BBA certification for RS5000?
I may have done as a sort of a copy and paste exercise, but I can't give you individual examples.
Did you ever come across any customer or potential customer who was proposing to use a rain screen or install a rain screen cladding exactly the same as that which had been tested, or at least according to the marketing literature had been tested?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No. Can we then go back to, or go on in the time, to CEL 401058. CEL 401058. Now, this is an email chain in October 2015 and runs, 2014 and runs to January 2015. Can we go to page 3, please, to begin with? This is an email from you to Debbie Berger on the 20th of October 2014, so 2 days before you sent her the NHBC document, as we've seen before. And you say, "Hi Debs," can you see that? It's on page 3, second email down.
I can.
It says, "Hi Debs, I think we have, although we have a product, we are lacking a third-party approval for the SFS inner brickwork outer application. Kingspan K12 have a BBA for this application, and we don't seem to be able to offer anything other than a carefully worded email. Is this something that we are looking to address in the new year?" And it doesn't get picked up again until the top of the page. You can see that when you ask Paul Evans to put it on his radar. You see that?
I do, yes.
Do you remember if this was in relation to RS5000?
No, I can't be sure.
You can see that you say Kingspan K12 have a BBA for this application, and we don't seem to be able to offer anything other than a carefully worded email. When you say carefully worded, what was that email? What did you say in it?
Well, I don't think I said anything. I don't know. I think I was looking for some sort of support from the product management marketing team to give me guidance for a product, or that we didn't have a product at the time.
Was the problem that you were identifying that Kingspan K12, or it's K15 perhaps, have a BBA and you didn't have one, and instead had to write an email which was carefully worded?
No, I mean, the cool therm, the K that is referenced there, the cool therm range, there was different products for different applications, and the K12, I think, just reading the subject matter there, it says brickwork outer, SFS inner.
I follow. So in fact, it's not a mistake for K15, it is actually a different product.
Potentially, yeah, I think that's likely.
Right.
And we may, or Celotex may not have had a product for that application.
I follow. Does this then tell us, at least in general terms, that if you don't have a BBA, you have to produce carefully worded marketing material or assurances to get around the problem?
Well, I think it's looking for evidence People
Yes.
are looking for evidence, full stop, yes.
Yes, and a carefully worded email wouldn't be evidence, and that's why you were putting it on Debbie Berger's radar.
Yes.
Yes. Can we go to CEL 401065, please? This is later in time. This is February 2015, and I just want to show you an email chain in that month, and start at the bottom of the email chain, if we can. We go to page 6, I think, is what we're after, and you can see that it begins on the 6th of February with an email from Chris Clark, who is a technical coordinator at MCIAT, and the subject is London Dock External Wall Detail. You see that?
I do.
And it comes to you, and copied to others within St George PLC, who I think are the main contractor. And if you look at the third paragraph down, he says the final thing we require is agreement of the insulation manufacturer that the detail we are proposing does not pose any risk over what's been tested. That's a bit vague, that, so we'll try and find out a bit more about what it's about, because you I think, respond. If you go up to page 5, you see that you write to Paul Evans internally, copied to Jonathan Roper and Debbie Berger, and you say, "Hi Paul, what are we prepared to say in relation to the use of RS 5000 on the London Dock project for St George? This is a huge job that will be ongoing for 10 years on the former News International site in Wapping." You see that?
I do.
And that's the 9th of February, so 3 days later. And then looking up the chain, Debbie Berger comes back to you the same day, much, much later the same day. "Hi, Jonathan, have you had an answer on this yet?" Presumably an answer from Paul Evans. And if we go up the chain again, we come to page 4. You go back to her and say nothing as yet, and I need to get an answer back soon, please. And then we go up the chain again, please, to page 3. We have an email from you to Debbie Berger. You see that?
I do.
And you set out the differences there between the system there and the one that's tested. And you say the inner build-up matches ours up to the sheathing board. The only elements that are different are that the exterior panels are stone and metal cassettes which seem to be butted up against one another. Someone needs to make a call, what we advise, or we will have to walk away from the job and just be happy selling the product to others. The problem that I have here is that most of the large rain screen jobs in London are being scrutinised by the specialists. Kingspan obviously want to hang on to as much business of this business as possible, so are writing their quotes, letters, unquotes. You see that?
I do.
And does that tell us that Celotex at least considered providing advice about suitability on certain projects, such as this one?
I think that's the question I was asking. Really, what would we do, or what would Celotex do, I should say, in relation to a response, i.e., I was seeking guidance.
About whether you should give advice, and if so, what advice you should give, or whether you should walk away.
Yeah, not the advice that I should give, but the advice that the company would give, or
Right.
we just face facts and walk away from this type of business.
You say this type of business. Can you be specific?
Well, where we're being asked to provide evidence or, I suppose, desktop studies or something to appease people who are looking for a build-up that was not as was tested.
And by specialists in that last paragraph, do you mean fire engineers or facade consultants?
Yeah, anyone who would be qualified to give such evidence.
Yeah. And by letters in quotation marks, what are you referring to there?
I think at the time, Kingspan were writing some sort of letter per project to, I'm not sure if it was to underwrite the use of the product, but it was something to do with give the contractor some sort of assurance that that build-up that had been used on that particular project would be, I don't know if acceptable or close to one of the tests that they had already performed. That was my sort of understanding of that.
I see. Now, can we just go on up the page? Mr. Chairman, I think I'll finish this email run off, if that's convenient.
Yes, of course, yes.
We can go on up the page to the bottom of page 2. Debbie Berger writes back to you on the 10th of February, and then I'm flipping back to page 3. She says, in your opinion, Jonathan, and I won't hold you to this, but do you think RS is ready for major projects? What do you mean by specialists? She's asked the question. I wish I could help you more in getting the product on these projects. It must be so frustrating to have to walk away from these opportunities. You see that?
I do.
And then if you go to your response to her, back on page 2, please, same day, 10th of February 2015, you say, just to keep you both in the loop, I have a meeting with the fire consultant for the project this Thursday. In the meeting, he will review our test report and look to establish what we, in capital letters, need to be prepared to say to appease the NHBC. I can't repeat what I was told about the NHBC in this email, but just to say that they aren't particularly helpful in resolving the ongoing conversation regarding the use of combustible materials. What was that about? When I say that, what were you told by the NHBC?
Well, I don't think I directly was told anything from the NHBC. This was just feedback from... so I'm just reading back through it again.
Yes, perhaps I'll rephrase my question. Perhaps I wasn't entirely accurate. In the first sentence, you are told that the fire consultant will review our test report and look to establish what we need to be prepared to say to appease the NHBC. What is it that you thought at the time the NHBC was concerned about?
Well, I just think the NHBC had a view that they wanted certification for the product in different build-ups, and this particular situation was one that we didn't have a test for. And I mean, looking back at it now, the NHBC were I don't think they were being helpful, i.e. from a commercial team wanted to push things forward, as in the contractor. But looking at this now, the NHBC were perfectly in their rights to require further evidence or testing data.
Was the concern, as you understood it, from the NHBC's side, that they were not happy that 8414 tests were being used for wider applications?
I couldn't tell you.
Right. And then finally on this email, if we go to the top of the chain, this is Debbie Berger coming back to you, even later on the 10th of February 2015, and she asks for a list of major projects where you've presented RS 5000 in the last few months and it wasn't specified. She says, I'm keen to learn from you as you're close to the specification process and probably have the most face-to-face experience of RS and major projects, so your opinion is really valuable in building up an honest picture of barriers to RS. For each of these projects, can you tell me who are the specialists that decide RS 5000 was non-compliant? I'm preparing a presentation for SPIN this Friday where RS 5000 will be subject to a rigorous discussion. Regarding the NHBC, I would kindly ask you not to pursue that line of inquiry at this stage. We've received another letter from the NHBC only today, which will be discussed at SPIN, so we're fully aware of what they're saying about RS 5000. On a positive note, they have indicated they would like to work with us. What did you take from that letter, that email?
Well, there's two parts there, really. There's Debbie requesting me for more feedback about the projects, and that where people didn't want to choose to use the material, and to understand who the specialists were who were blocking the use or not accepting, I suppose, the test data that was available. And then the third part is the NHBC, and apparently there's a letter there, but I wasn't privy to what was in that letter to the management team at Celotex.
And why, to the best of your understanding, were the specialists not accepting the test data?
I think it was mainly because, going back to the case that the Celotex RS5000 only had a singular test, physical test, and at that stage, the NHBC in particular weren't happy that that was enough proof or enough evidence to be used with other systems or extrapolate the data for other build-ups.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Mr. Roome, we're going to have a break now for everyone to get some lunch. We'll come back at 2:05, please. And again, as I say, no talking to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it over the break.
Okay.
Is that right? Thank you very much. I'd like to go to the usher, please. Thank you. 2:05, please.